Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Soulcial Sage. I'm Sage Hill, your host. Today, I want to jump right into it because I think this topic is going to be one that gets a lot of interest. And that's because I'm going to be talking about the difference between being a bride and being a wife. And there is a vast difference. There are so many women who are certainly interested in having a family, being married, and thinking about their futures from the standpoint of being in a long-term relationship, i.e., a marriage. And I think that for many of us, particularly many Black women, with so much focus recently on the fact that there seems to be, if you will, a shortage of men that are either eligible or ready to be in a serious and committed relationship, that it causes us to feel as if somehow we are missing out, as if somehow we are at a disadvantage when it comes to relationships. Well, I want to just pause first and foremost and say that love doesn't have a color, but love and relationships and all that comes with it is not something to be rushed into just because you feel or you feel pressured, or you have something going on inside that makes you feel as if you have to be at a certain stage in your life by a certain time or point in your life based on societal standards and expectations. And let's just be honest, many of those expectations aren't applicable these days. As with each generation, there are changes that are associated with that generation, but there are things that impact those generations in different ways. Just like we moved from the industrial revolution, if you will, to the technology revolution, which is one that we're in today. Along with that, there are changes in terms of how society views things and how individuals within society respond to these changes. This is no longer the day and time that my mother grew up in, and for many of you, not even the day and time that I grew up in. Having been in school in the 80s, relationships were different then, a lot different than they are now. I would say that men in my generation, when they were in their 20s, and certainly by the time they were in their early 30s, were thinking about marriage, were planning to settle down. But today, that's not necessarily the case. And let's just be honest, it's not just about the men, right? There are many women who have made a determination that they want to spend a longer period of time single so that they can enjoy things that they want to experience. It could be improving themselves by continuing with their education or establishing themselves in their careers or starting a business or traveling the world or doing all of these things. We have choices. And it's important that we maintain as women our right to our choices, especially during a time where our choices and our rights are being reviewed by a tribunal of Supreme Court justices who deem it appropriate and even lawful to make decisions about the decisions and the choices that others have. Regardless as to what my views may be on that subject, I don't want anybody thinking for me. And none of us should want that. And when the door is opened in one arena, that just opens up the floodgates for various rights to be brought into question. Because what is a right anyway? Well, it's your right to make a decision in terms of whether or not you want to be married. And if you want to consider marriage, when you want to consider that, with who you want to consider that. But it's important to think about the distinctions between being married, i.e., the wedding, and being married, i.e., the life that comes with it. In my book that will be released this year, called Single Savvy Sisters, I talk about the fact that as young women, we are brought up to believe in fairy tales. We hear the story of Cinderella. We watch Beauty and the Beast. We look at these images on television where a woman is often depicted as a damsel in distress or in this fairy tale scenario wherein we're being rescued by a knight in shining armor. We buy into this magical concept behind marriage and weddings in particular. This magical time where we dress up and for one day in our life, we feel like a princess. It's certainly a step above a prom. It's certainly a step above any other celebration that we may have as we move into our teenage years, our sweet 16s, and other special events that we may celebrate throughout our lives. It is the one time that I think you'll hear more women say that they want to feel like a princess. And why do we want to feel like a princess? Because of the very images that we have seen and we have grown up with and that we have adopted and began to believe that this fairy tale is something to aspire to. But the fact of the matter is, all of the planning and all of the outfits and all of the attention and certainly all of the money that is spent planning to be a bride, planning for your wedding, it's stressful. There is no waving of a magic wand. And all of a sudden you're dressed in, the finest gown and everything just falls into place. No, that takes time and money. And there is so much that goes into planning a wedding that has nothing to do with the wedding. You have people who get attitudes because of guest list and what the limitations are with your budget and what you can afford and what you can't afford and who's going to be in the wedding and what role they're going to play and who should I choose to be in this role or that role and how is it going to make them feel and feelings and drama and all of these other things that are a part of it. And yet and still we spend thousands upon thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours preparing for an event, not preparing for a life change. Marriage is a life change. Being a wife is a life change. Being a bride, that's momentary. And here's the thing. When you have all of those plans come together and that day is finally there, and you're standing behind that door waiting on them to open it up, or waiting to walk through the clearing to go down the aisle to meet your groom, it goes like that. All of that time and anguish and stress and crying and excitement and myriad of emotions that go into this one day, these few minutes, to be quite honest, that go into the actual ceremony and the party afterwards, if you have a reception. All of that goes by so quickly. And sometimes marriages do too. I'm going to be honest. I know I've been married more times than I care to remember. But each one of those were a learning experience for me. And it took time for me to realize that I was chasing the wrong thing. And sometimes I was allowing the wrong people to catch me, to chase me, pursue me, and catch me. But being a wife, that's a whole different ballgame. Being a wife requires you to really know who you are as a woman, to have come to grips with being vulnerable with another person, to understand that when you bring two people together as a husband and a wife, you're two totally different people with two totally different upbringings and two different expectations, different communication styles, different ways of doing things. Something as simple as the food that you eat. Because you grew up in two totally different households, those experiences were different. And I don't care how many similarities we try to create, how many things that we say we have in common. The fact of the matter is that we will always have more things that we have as differences. There are more differences than there are commonalities because you're two distinct individuals. Just think about this. You live with a roommate, same sex. You're going to have differences. Whether you're in a heterosexual relationship or a homosexual relationship, you're going to have differences. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. It has everything to do with differences. Because we're all unique. We all come here with different DNA, different fingerprints. We're not the same. Even twins aren't the same. Twins can have totally different personalities, totally different outlooks on life. So it stands to reason that when you bring a man and a woman together, when you come together in a marriage, man and woman, woman and woman, it doesn't matter. You're two distinct and different individuals. And with differences comes conflict. And with conflict comes the need to be able to communicate. And that takes practice. And honestly, it takes having someone to counsel you, not just for a few weeks before you get married, but actually, even before that, I strongly suggest getting into counseling, having someone sit down with you and talk about what your standards are, What are your standards? What are their standards? What are your boundaries? What are their boundaries? What are your goals? What are their goals for a variety of things, for your finances, for where you'll live, for what kind of work you want to do? Do you want to have a business? Do you want to work for another organization? What is that going to look like? How about children? How they're going to be raised? Is someone going to work while the other person stays at home? Are you both going to work? What about your finances? How does that person feel about finances? Do they really believe that when you're married that it's like you're a roommate and you split things 50-50 down the middle? Is that what you want? Maybe that is what you want. But if it is, you need to find somebody that wants the same thing. And if you don't know what you really want, and if you aren't clear on the things that matter most to you, these non-negotiables, how then do you expect to get into a situation as a wife and not have some conflict? It's important to have conversations before you walk down that aisle. Being a bride, that is an occasion that most of us aspire to. And once we've experienced it, it's something that we realize goes by so quickly. Yet being in that marriage, that's when the work begins. There's a reality show called, oh gosh, I want to say, Why Did I Get Married? That's not it. It's Married at First Sight. Married at First Sight. And, for those of you that don't know, it's an experiment where these experts bring two people together based on a battery of questionnaires and tests and things that they do to find the people that they feel will be the best match, the most compatible. Yet when they bring these individuals together, it's a whole nother ballgame. I don't care how compatible they feel like these people should be. These individuals come to the table with a set of expectations and values and differences that create fireworks. You put them together and everything is just wonderful unless they get to, the altar and that person is not what they expected or what they wanted. They don't feel attracted to that person. Then it kind of starts right there. But most of us don't have that experiment. Most of us know the person. And yet, as much as we think we know that person, my question for you is, how well do you know yourself? How much time have you put into considering what being a wife is, as opposed to the time that you put into planning to be a bride? How much effort are you putting into that? And what are the things that you think about when you're alone by yourself and you're wondering, or there's red flags that have come up and you ignore them? But those same red flags are going to be there and they're going to start flapping in the wind once you walk down that aisle and you all come together as a couple. Those same issues that you may have ignored are still going to be there. And that is why it is so important to seek counseling before you enter into even an agreement that you want to get married. And certainly during that whole process of planning, because it's stressful and you need to keep your eye on the prize, which is the marriage, not the wedding. And here's another thing. There are so many people out there that will tell you so many different things, these strategies and tips on how to get a man, but very few strategies and tips on how to prepare for being a wife, how to prepare for being in a marriage, and how to understand that the intent of this is not going into it and if it doesn't work out, oh well. The intent is to be in this relationship for a lifetime. Now, I have a lot of hope. I actually have more hope for this generation than I did even for my generation in terms of the ability for young women today to know who they are and what they want and to be decisive in their decisions. But as hopeful as I am about that, I also realize that that trap is still there. That clock that someone tells you is ticking, that's a myth. We all know we don't walk around with a clock inside of us that is going off and it's just tick, 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 waiting on us to get married or have a baby or some other milestone that someone else has created for us. Those may not be your milestones. Decide for yourself and ignore that clock. In fact, break it because broken clocks don't tick. How about that? But getting back to this whole idea of my hope for this generation and my belief that this generation can be successful at marriage, unlike the generations before. There seems to be this desire to get back to a place in time where things were more simple, where we are more intentional about the decisions that we make, whether it be what we put in our bodies, what we eat, how we take care of ourselves, both physically and emotionally. There is this resurgence of attention to our feelings and our needs as women. And it's for this reason, for the reason that I see women being intentional and purposeful and taking their times and saying, I'm okay with being single. That is what gives me hope. Because I believe that if there is this level of intentionality that transcends gender, and men are being intentional and women are being intentional about living their authentic lives and doing the things that make them happiest and enjoying their lives and looking forward to their futures, but living in the moment. When two people like that, who are intentional, come together, when they've taken the time to know who they are, to fix the issues that they may have internally, to come to a better place of understanding themselves. When you bring those two people together, you have a better chance of a long-lasting relationship, especially when they understand the importance of counseling and how that counseling can help them with their communication. Because communication is probably the most critical thing that any relationship can have. So I believe that we are moving slowly but surely away from the fairy tale. And we are moving more into a place of reality and intentionality in how we do what we do and who we do it with. You have choices, and you must know that the choices that you make today are consequences later. I used to tell my daughter, life is about choice and consequence. Choose wisely. This has been Sage Hill with the Soulcial Sage. I hope you've enjoyed this topic. If you did, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening. As always, it's been a pleasure, my treasures.